A priest by the name of Father Patrick Briscoe,
I'd love him.
he writes, through study and prayer, it's not too late to get Vatican II right.
Right.
It's got a picture of Pope John the 23rd having the opening Mass of the Second Vatican Council. It's a Trinity Mass. He writes, the priest writes, 60 years ago on October 11th, 1962, Pope St. John the 23rd solemnly opened the Second Vatican Council. Addressing the Council Fathers, he said, the major interest of the Ecumenical Council is this, that the sacred heritage of Christian truth be safeguarded and expounded with greater efficacy. Well, that
didn't happen.
Quote, it hasn't happened. In fact, they want to change the teachings on homosexual, on contraception. No, they haven't. The opposite has happened.
Yeah.
The article says, referring to the sweeping and political and economic changes that had occurred in the 19th and 20th centuries, John the 23rd rejoices that the church would have the opportunity to return to the essentials of the spiritual life. That hasn't happened. Particularly the instruction of the faithful. That hasn't happened. Here's my comment.
Tell me.
This is a fact. More Catholics went to Mass before 1965 than after 1965 than after Vatican II.
That's a fact.
Most Catholics knew and read their Baltimore Catechism and could quote large chunks of it by memory prior to 1965. Now, let's be honest today, Terry. Today, very, very, very few people have ever read the 1994 or 92 Catechism of the Catholic Church promulgated by Pope John Paul II. It's an inch and a half thick. Most people have not read it. Most people before 65, they were reading their Baltimore Catechism because it was quick to read, question and answer. The article says, free from worldly fetters that trammeled, that means restrained or impeded her in past ages, Holy Mother Church had a new opportunity to preach and catechize.
And we lost.
I don't agree with Father there. He said that we had impediments in the past. I don't know what he's talking about. We had the Protestant Reformation, I guess.
You know what I think he's talking about, Jess? And I'll be blunt. Older priests told me this, that there was a problem in the church where people were saying a Trinity Mass really fast. I've been to Trinity Mass.
I've seen them too.
I get that. I get that. There's always in the humanity of the church. You're always going to have some people not living the faith, or there were priests who were alcoholics. We've always had that. These are the things I've heard people say, that the church needed to be renewed. But overall, let's just be honest, Jess, 80% of the Catholics, dude, were going to Mass on Sunday. And look at the sacrament of marriage. People were getting married in the church. They were having babies. I mean, hello?
Yeah, whether they were praying the rosary at Mass or doing their devotions, at least they were going, Terry.
Yes, that's my point. So I see where he's going in that direction.
Okay.
And there's always going to be that going on no matter how. I mean, the church is never going to be perfect.
The cure has been the cure has been worse than the problem.
Exactly.
Further clarifying, the Pope said, what is needed, this is Pope John 23rd.
Yeah.
And what everyone imbued with a truly Catholic, Christian Catholic and apostolic spirit craves today is that this doctrine shall be more widely known, more deeply understood, and more penetrating in its effects on men's moral.
Did that happen? Absolutely not.
No, that's Bishop Snyder. You know, what the title of his book?
The springtime that never came.
Yeah.
You like that title, don't you, Jess?
For John the 23rd, this wasn't a matter of changing timeless truths. He insisted that it is absolutely vital that the church shall never for an instant lose sight of that sacred patrimony of truth inherited from the fathers, but rather a matter of updating the way in which these sacred perennial and unchanging truths are set forth in church.
Let me jump in for a minute, Jess.
Ahead,
That's
Eric.
why you and I have been constantly talking about the perennial teachings of the church. And even, Bishop Strickland continues to nail that all the time. And, many people in the church, and I won't say who, Jesse, but I know very important archbishops in our country who say there are no more perennial teachings of the church. Okay, I'm not going to name names, but you see, these guys lost it. They're not Vatican. They say, well, I'm a Vatican II bishop. No, you're
Lost
not.
their supernatural faith.
You have lost your faith. Exactly. And this point right here that you said, that John the 23rd says, the matters of changing timeless truths. See, tell that to Father Martin. Tell that to the liberals. I would even tell that to Pope Francis. Pope Francis, read what your predecessor said about Vatican II, because when you talk about Vatican II, it sounds like you're talking about a completely different document.
Yeah. Well, Terry, Pope Francis is trying to get rid of the patrimony, which is one of the timeless truths that goes back to the 5th century, by getting rid of the TLM.
Yes.
And so I would just have to say that the springtime of the new evangelization, when you have 12 to 14% of Catholics in the U.S. going to Mass, it's utterly failed.
And we're high compared to Europe.
Yeah, but such a project was far from easy going. The night that John the 23rd announced his plan to call a council, Cardinal Giovanni Battista Montini, who became Pope Paul VI in 1963, called a friend and commented,
It's funny.
"The holy old boy doesn't realize what a hornet's nest he's stirring up," close quote. The specters of simplistic divides, according to narrow political terms, as reported in the American press and elsewhere, between well-meaning liberals deemed morally good and conservatives defending a dysfunctional status quo, haunt the Catholic faithful to the present day. A hornet's nest indeed. So basically he's saying that the mainstream media, they took sides right at Vatican II.
Oh, big time, big time.
Yeah, the mainstream media described their allies as the Vatican II liberals as morally good, and they called the Orthodox bishops at Vatican II corrupt conservatives defending a dysfunctional status.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess you know what side the mainstream media was on at the
Big time.
Vatican
And
Council.
Jesse, in that time, Father Ron Deschamps was in the seminary, and he told me how he was in the seminary. He was reporting on the council, and all these leaked documents that came out from the liberal side were basically coming out ahead of time. And so there was a definite agenda there that nobody can deny.
Exactly. To respond to these and other phantoms, some Catholic intellectuals have begun to argue that the council was hijacked. That's one theory.
Of course.
These thinkers are looking for a way to reconcile the dolorous realities of the early 20th century and John the 23rd's noble intentions with the results of the council, such as the church's teaching on religious liberty, ecumenical overtures, or adaptations to the liturgy, results with which they do not themselves agree. Now, here's my comment.
Tell me, Jess.
I mean, that's partly true that the council was hijacked, but I actually think that Vatican II, much of it was never actually implemented, and I can prove that to you just by looking at Sacrosanctum. Sacrosanctum Concilium looks
on the liturgy.
It looks more like the Tridentine Mass than the Novus Ordo Mass.
Yep.
And also, we know that Archbishop Bonini, a Mason, was the head of the liberal Concilium. They met after Vatican II from 1965 to 1970. They started changing the church through this concilium, specifically the Mass. They started changing it brick by brick. True. And so the theology that underpinned the council had imagined that the Mass transitioning from this highly specialized transaction between the priest and God to this true event of a sacramental communion, a communion now that's both, it's now more horizontal. It's now more amongst the faithful.
Yeah.
So the vertical aspect has between God and the priest and us and God, that's been de-emphasized.
That's right.
And so in the implementation of this vision, I would say that the vertical and sacramental aspects, which were so heavily present in the old Mass, they've almost been completely lost or horizontalized in the community Mass, in meeting people where they're at in the Vatican II Mass, Terry. The Vatican II Mass it's a typical folk Mass.
Yeah.
Which looks a lot. Protestants have told me. Paul Clay walked back in from Calvary Chapel after many years. He goes, "This looks like Calvary Chapel." That's what he told me when he came back to the church.
I believe it. And to prove all this, Abbott Boniface Lukey, who was a friend of mine, believe it or not, was at Peritas before, during, and after the council. He worked with Bonini. I have a 3-hour interview with him, and everybody should get that. Just call the 877-526-2151 number, because when you listen to this 3-hour dialogue with Bob Hutchinson, I hired him as a National Catholic Register writer to do this interview. We had all these questions about Bonini and about what took place after the council. He's saying exactly what Jess Romero just said. Now, Jesse was a little boy when this was going on, so he didn't know what was going to happen at the time. But Abbott Boniface was an eyewitness to it, Jess. And I think that's why his interview is so good, because he was there, and he and Bonini had a walking away of friendship over this because he believed that what was originally said in the documents of Vatican II were hijacked by Bunini between 65 and 69. Mm-hmm. That's his position, and that's someone who worked on the documents, not Jess Romero sitting back in his studio or Terry Barber here way back. No, these are guys that were there when it happened, Jesse. He's an eyewitness to the corruption that went on there.
Wow. Others will say the documents of Vatican II, that's the actual teachings of the council, are sound. However, the application of the teaching by many was ill-considered, even heretical. That's another position that I hold to as well. Mm-hmm. There's only 4 documents that I would admit that have posed some problems. I've got my Vatican II book here, well worn out. The Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy, that's never been implemented. I can tell you right now.
Of course not.
I can read chunks of it. Yeah, it looks like the Trinity Mass when you read it.
Yeah.
Another problematic document, which is not a dogmatic document, so I can say this. It's a pastoral document. It's called the Decree on Ecumenism. And you don't believe me? Think about Pachamama. Think about what happened in Canada.
That's been
horrible. Look at the Assisi gatherings.
Stop evangelizing.
It comes from this Decree on Ecumenism. Another problematic document, and I'll tell you this from people like, the Wanderer and Remnant, people that I've been reading for years as well, is also the Declaration on the Relation of the Church to Non-Christian Religions. In other words, we've softened our position, separated brothers, or not called Protestants or heretics or schismatics, separated brothers. We worship the one true God with Islam. Statements like this that have never been made before are found on this Declaration on the Relation of the Church to Non-Christian Religions. And then the other one that's again a little bit that a lot of Catholics would have a problem with is the Declaration on Religious Freedom.
Yep.
The Declaration on Religious Freedom. Those are the 4 documents that really most people that have more of a conservative Orthodox view see a problem there, and you can see it in the modern church. The problems have manifested.
Amen. We come back.